This program is brought to you by Monflo, ITAR Innovative Technology, Real Root Supplements, Pro Privacy, Goud 999 en VRB, van eenmanszaak naar BV.
It's precisely when things are out in the open, they're right in front of you. It seems like normal people that are doing this, we can't see it because it's hiding in plain sight. Public emergency is an enormous business opportunity. When I lay this out, it's so monstrous in its dimensions that people can't believe it. They just can't believe it. And they could go and they could look at all of the documentary evidence. It's all here in the book. And it's true, the scientific technological elite, with the protection of the military and the intelligence agencies, they do whatever they want.
They are lying to you and they are controlling you.
That's your answer. We are beyond the tipping point.
During the battle for science in February this year, we brought some of the most courageous and outspoken international voices of our time to the Netherlands. Names such as Del Bigtree, Peter McCullough, Sushri Bhakti, and many others shared their perspectives on the state of science, health, media, and the societal developments we are all witnessing today. In addition to their appearances on stage, we recorded exclusive interviews. In this series, you now have the opportunity to watch these conversations. Today, I offer you my first ever interview with a crime writer, John Leake, co-author of several books with cardiologist Dr. Peter McCullough about the COVID crimes. Very intriguing and more than worthwhile watching, because not only is there a COVID crime scene, they left a smoking gun on it. This is John Leake.
This is the battle for science.
This is the first time in my life that I'm going to interview a true crime author, the American John Leake. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
You wrote this interesting book together with Peter McCullough, the cardiologist, and the title is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. We'll discuss this book later. But what I would like to know, John, what is a true crime author? Just to have that clear.
A true crime author, and where I think it's very pertinent to our story, because it involves organized crime as well. It's not only individuals committing crime. True crime also encompasses organized crime, like your mafia in Italy, for example. A true crime author is someone who will research preferably a story with interesting true characters, a true criminal act or actions are committed. You try and go in and find out exactly what happened, and then you take the facts of the story and you shape it into a readable and compelling story in book form. So that is the book genre of true crime. It's become very popular in recent years with Netflix and some of these television series. Many of them are actually based on true crime books.
Yeah. And who is John Leake?
John Leake is I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I studied history and philosophy at Boston University. I had the great privilege of studying with a great British philosopher named Roger Scruton, a very well-known philosopher and mostly in the United Kingdom. I then went to Vienna, Austria on a graduate school scholarship in philosophy. I was an academic fellow in Vienna. I fell in love with Vienna. At about the same time, I fell out of love with academia. So I lived in Vienna for many years. That's where I stumbled across my first true crime story about a Viennese serial killer who also was I'd call him a semi-literary celebrity. He'd written a couple of books. He was a bit of a man about town.
This is no fiction. This person really existed, huh?
This really happened in the early 90s. A series of women disappeared from the Vienna red light district. He then went to the Austrian National Broadcasting Corporation, the ORF. He proposed doing a radio series, an investigative reportage on these women disappearing from the red light district. He interviewed friends of the murdered women. He interviewed the Vienna chief of police. Eventually, the head homicide detective in Vienna began to realize, I think that the journalist might be the killer.
Wow.
And in fact, he was. So one of the things that I learned in this story is the power, the potency of groupthink. Because it's rather complicated. It's a whole nother story. But the Austrian intelligentsia was very interested in this man because in his youth, he had murdered a girl in Germany in 1974. He got a life sentence for it. While he was in prison, he wrote a novel about his childhood. The Austrian intelligentsia, artists, writers, scientists, they then signed a petition to grant him an early release from his life imprisonment. He was released from prison as a celebrated case of criminal rehabilitation. In fact, he had not been rehabilitated. In fact, he was the worst criminal since the Second World War in Austria. So the intellectuals, if they're swept into this phenomenon that we call groupthink, they can make enormous errors of judgment. I think that was probably the most valuable illustrative lesson from my first book. And then I just became interested in, I like stories in which there is a broad social and intellectual dimension of misperception, groupthink. It's a theme that I oftentimes have explored in my books.
But if the investigator, in this case, the journalist, was the villain, what are you then?
I might be. It's an interesting question. And I remember I once went out on a date with a woman in Vienna, and she said, I know you want me to come up to your place and have a drink after dinner, but I'm not going to your place. And I said, why not? She said, you're interested in investigative journalists who are themselves the killers. So how do I know that you're not the same? And I said, well, you can't. You can't know that. I mean, maybe I am.
It's confusing.
It is.
Yeah. But then about your book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. It's your second book together with Peter McCullough.
Correct. It's my second book with Dr. McCullough. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, where Dr. McCullough, at the time the action of our first book begins, he was the vice president of internal medicine at our largest medical center in Dallas. 2020 is where the action of the book opens. We're told that there's this respiratory viral pandemic emanating from China.
What was the title of the first book?
The Courage to Face COVID-19. And I began to perceive already in March of 2020 that a lot of what our public health agencies were telling us probably wasn't true.
How did you know?
If you study true crime, if you do true crime investigations for a long period of time, the mind develops what I would call pattern recognition. The mind begins to perceive elements of fraud.
In the Netherlands, we call that a bullshit detector.
A bullshit detector, yeah, another way of putting it. So one's bullshit detector becomes sensitive. It's like a seismograph. It begins to become sensitive to the elements of fraud. The first thing I noticed was it's not plausible that this emerged from nature. That was immediately not plausible to me. You only had to look at this for about 5 minutes to realize probably not emerging from nature. And then the second thing was, who conducts the investigation? Well, the WHO sends to Wuhan, China. The head of the investigative delegation was Peter Daszak at EcoHealth Alliance. Well, who's he? Well, he's the one that was organizing the grant funding to do some of this manipulation of bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So this is pretty child's play stuff. I don't want to make myself out to be a great investigative genius. I'm not. But it's just a little bit of experience. And these things become quite evident. The other thing was, it was the Italians, I want to say at the end of March 2020, some Italian pathologists did an early autopsy study. And they said, okay, we have confirmed these people died of the syndrome. I mean, we can look at the whole patient vignette and we can see they weren't on the edge of death, like hanging on for another 48 hours and then died once they tested positive. No, they appear to have developed a syndrome that then progressed to death. And what they found was people who had already exceeded life expectancy in Italy seemed to be the most vulnerable. The median age of death was 83. So this seems to have been a viral illness. Some people, some cohort of the population could get in quite a bit of trouble with this, but it seemed to be primarily a syndrome, a disease syndrome that affected people who are older and frail. So when we were told it poses a lethal risk even to the young, even to people who are vital for making the economy hum along, even young students, even they are at lethal risk, it became evident to me very quickly that wasn't true.
Wow, that's interesting, because that study of the Italian health authority, I saw that, I read it, was actually the pivotal moment that I woke up.
Oh, so you saw the same thing, yeah?
You're the first person that I meet that actually brings that up, because for me that was the crucial moment that I thought, when the Italians, where the virus in Bergamo was spreading like hell, the media told us. When the Italians actually give us a comforting message that the people that died didn't die of COVID, of Corona, but with Corona, and they had an age of 81 plus, comorbidities, obesitas, it was kind of comforting that it was hitting the group that was already in the stadium of
the end.
Not the young people. So for me, that was the moment that I thought, wow, I have to investigate it for myself and to understand, why are they exaggerating this story? And that's why I woke up personally.
Well, okay, so this is a fun question. Do you know that famous hospital in Bergamo? Do you know how many ICU beds were in the intensive care unit of that hospital? Do you know how many?
No, I don't.
There were 47. So when you have the international media in the parking lot of this hospital saying the ICU is overflowing, well, there are 47 beds in the I mean, that's like saying my bedroom is overflowing with beautiful women. I mean, well, it's a small bedroom. Do you understand? I mean, is I'm sorry about the salacious attempt at humor, but I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's on the face of it, ridiculous.
We had the same phenomenon in the Netherlands, where the first cases were emerging. They also said the hospital was overflowing with ill patients, and they only had 4 ICUs.
Precisely.
It was a small hospital in the middle in the south of the Netherlands, and it seemed like something really big was happening.
No, I was just curious, because I lived in Europe in the winter of 2018. It was a particularly cold winter. There was quite a cold front that hit the United Kingdom. And I had remembered reading in the British press, I was spending a bit of time in London at the time, that the seasonal flu in the winter, January, February of 2018, had been rather severe. And you could read in just the British press that there were hospital systems or hospitals in London which with severe cases of influenza, pneumonia, seasonal influenza, so that there weren't enough beds in the ICU.
Same pattern.
Yeah, same pattern.
Yeah.
So what happened with COVID-19, and this is now 6 years into it, I think it became evident that this SARS-CoV-2, remember the first one came out of China in 2002, 2003. This particular kind of pathogen became a pathogen of great interest to pandemic planners. There's a whole industry, the pandemic planning and response industry, going back to organized crime. We now know that after the passage of the 2005 PrEP Act in the United States, which granted full liability immunity to any industry producing what are called pandemic or bioweapon countermeasures. So a countermeasure could be a diagnostic test, it could be a Roche PCR test, or it could be a vaccine, it could be personal protective equipment. Once the Secretary of Health and Human Services invokes a public emergency, liability protection is granted to anyone producing recognized countermeasures, and by recognized, I mean Health and Human Services says, yes, this is a legitimate countermeasure. At that point, two things happen. You get liability protection for your countermeasure, for your product. And secondly, we know from the lesson had been learned, if there is any kind of public emergency, the United States government, the other governments of Europe, of whoever, will provide enormous sums of money that no one in private enterprise could even begin to conceive. Billions of dollars would then be readily made available to the manufacturers of countermeasures. So it doesn't require a whole lot of conspiratorial imagination to see where this goes. Public emergency is an enormous business opportunity.
De uitzendingen van Lighthouse TV bevatten reclames. En ik weet dat sommigen van jullie daar last van hebben. Toch is het belangrijk dat ze er zijn. Want zonder deze inkomsten zou Lighthouse nu niet bestaan. Maar er is goed nieuws. Want vanaf oktober starten we met het Lighthouse Insider account. Daarmee kijk je al onze programma's volledig reclamevrij. Krijg je korting op de webshop, events en krijg je toegang tot de aankoop van een Lighthouse TV token. Een micro-aandeel op de blockchain. Mooie ontwikkelingen dus, maar tot die tijd wil ik je vragen om begrip. Haak niet af als je reclames ziet, maar probeer om te denken. Iedere spot die je ziet helpt Lighthouse TV financieel vooruit. En draagt indirect bij aan ons onafhankelijke en kritische geluid. En dat is keihard nodig. Dank voor je steun.
Fast forward to 2016, Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum founded a new institution called the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. And the entire business plan, which was published in 2017, characterized the next pandemic, and it was characterized in the business plan as certainly coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. This will provide an enormous opportunity for anyone who is invested in CEPI. This business plan or perspective was distributed all over the world to governments, wealthy individuals.
What's CEPI?
CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. It was a business entity that was founded by the Gates Foundation in conjunction with the World Economic Forum. There were a few different entities, but the driving entity was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And CEPI, I'll again repeat, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, was principally, or I should say entirely concerned with new vaccine development. And the business plan, which was circulated and which you can still read, says if you invest in CEPI, if there's a pandemic, or when there's a pandemic, this will be an enormous opportunity. Anyone who's invested in the coalition will then be in a position to yield the benefits of any economic benefit arising from the pandemic. And
Which is proven right.
Which was proven right. CEPI sponsored the human trials for Moderna's messenger RNA vaccine. What you discover is this recognition that an epidemic or pandemic, and it's always proclaimed, it's coming, is a business opportunity, and an enormous business opportunity. So you start sort of looking down these little avenues, and you see it's all very closely related. Moderna, the National Institutes of Health, CEPI, Pfizer-BioNTech. This is a constellation of corporate and state entities combined with these huge international foundations, which yield a very favorable tax status for where the money flows. They're all working more or less in concert with each other. They're doing pandemic planning simulations like Event 201 in October of 2019. You see things that I think are just really notable. So on August the 30th, 2019, the Gates Foundation bought about 5 million shares of this privately owned company in Mainz, Germany, BioNTech. It had not yet gone public. This was end of August 2019. I think about 5 million shares for $18 a share.
Basically, what you're saying is following the money leads you to a pattern and also an insight in what was actually going on behind the scenes. But then again, this is just about money making.
Control. Money is
You could say people trying to make money, that's not a bad thing unless you're harming people.
Well, if it's based on fraud, if these pathogens are not actually emerging from... I'll tell you something about emergent...
Because what is the crime? Because I know where you're heading to, and of course I see what you're seeing, but I also want to ask you this question for people that are disbelievers in your story, to convince them that you truly found something criminal going on. What is the crime? Because money making is no crime.
Well, money making by way of fraud. I mean, it's not a naturally... Let's take SARS.
What is the fraud?
Well, first of all, the pathogen is not a naturally emerging pathogen.
Yeah, but the virology, the people in the lab are saying, well, we are working on gain of function, but that's to prevent something evil happening. So we have to be ahead of the virus.
Yes, well, this reminds me, I had a friend in high school that would go around at night with a sledgehammer, and he would break sprinkler heads, the things that open in the morning and water the yard. And then he would present himself at the door the next day saying, "Madam, I saw that your sprinkler head is broken. Can I repair it for you?" I want to tell you something that I think most of your audience doesn't know. The big perceived bonanza in pandemic planning and in biodefense, it was based on the experience of the 1918 Spanish influenza. And there are a lot of things that at the time was not properly understood about, starting with the fact that the prevailing theory of the Spanish influenza in 1918 and 1919 was that it was a bacterium named after a famous German colleague of Robert Koch. His name was Richard Pfeiffer. They had this prevailing idea that the Spanish influenza was caused by a bacterium. It was only in the 30s that it was discovered that it was an influenza virus. And ever since this development of virology at the end of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, there has been this insistence that there's going to be another great, probably influenza pandemic along the lines of what happened in 1918. But there are a lot of things going on in the world in 1918. First of all, the world was at the end of the First World War. You had millions of young soldiers crowded together in trenches, crowded together in military installations. The industry, transportation, and agriculture of Europe had been ruined. I personally know people in Austria who had to chop up heirloom family furniture just to get through the winter of 1918, early 1919. So you can't compare the conditions of 1918. We also don't exactly know all of the ecological circumstances in which the 1918 influenza pathogen emerged. You can't compare that to Europe or the United States today. And there have been studies concluding that well-nourished, in a well-nourished civilization with good hygiene and good food supply, we're just not going to see another 1918 Spanish flu.
I get what you're saying.
But just
what is the fraud?
But just to conclude, the discovery was we're not going to get another Spanish influenza. Nature is not going to cooperate with our pandemic planning industry. So if we're going to get another Super Bowl of pandemic response, we're going to have to make the pathogens ourselves. So now you get into this dual use research of concern, DURC. It's make the pathogen under the pretense of also developing vaccines and therapeutics against it. So this is what we're told. Well, we wouldn't be making it unless we were concerned that it could, through a natural evolutionary process, eventually emerge in nature.
I have to ask this, John, because you are a crime author, an investigative journalist. I think I've seen the same patterns that lead to this discovery that you're describing, but I have never found actual proof that what I feel is the case. Did you find proof that these biolabs where they did this gain of function research were actually instruments to create a pandemic? Or were the intentions of those people maybe to prevent a pandemic? And was it a coincidence?
The claim. So there were two researchers, one in the Netherlands named Ron Fouchier.
Yep.
Ron Fouchier claimed, we are making H5N1 contagious through respiratory transmission amongst ferrets. The ferret respiratory tract is strangely similar to that of the human, because our goal is, should there someday be an H5N1, which is avian flu, that should it, through natural evolution, mutate to where it becomes infectious amongst humans, not from some guy working on a goose farm, but between humans, we want to be ahead of it.
Exactly. That's the narrative also in the media.
But this is not plausible. And in fact, I'll go one step further. It gets really interesting. There were some guys who wrote a paper. It was an editorial in Nature, the great news academic journal, Nature. In 2018, it was, who are the lead authors on this editorial? Christian Andersen was one of them. He was at Scripps. I believe, I beg your pardon, the names of the virologists are slipping me right now. But a group of very eminent virologists in Nature in 2018, they wrote an editorial or an opinion piece, and they said the entire industry of trying to predict what viruses are going to naturally evolve and emerge in nature to become transmissible to humans, the whole thing is based on fallacious suppositions. There's no way we could predict this. It's impossible. It may take millions of years. It may never happen. I mean, they give the example of influenza viruses in animals, which we have no idea how this came about, and there's no evidence that they could ever make the jump from animals to humans. So the whole proposition is based on something that's just not plausible. So why are they doing it? The reason why they're doing it, I think, is obvious. The militaries of the world are interested in this as having biological weapons capacity. What is then presented to the naive public is that, oh no, we're not developing bioweapons. We're just developing viruses of the influenza, or in this case, the coronavirus family, that could naturally emerge in order to develop vaccines. This isn't true. These are being developed for their biological weaponry capacity.
I think I was infected with this bioweapon because when I got ill for 3 weeks, quite serious. I mean, I didn't have to go to hospital, but I felt this chemical sensation in my lungs. It was a really, really weird sensation. I have never experienced that before. So everything in my body said, this is not natural.
So I too contracted COVID-19, and I felt the syndrome was one of just feeling so incredibly strange and fatigued that I'd never experienced from a common cold. Now, I've never had influenza, so I can't compare it to influenza, but this was like no other cold I'd ever had. So the other thing that's important to understand about bioweapons, lethality, virulence is not unto itself that interesting. What you want is disruption. To just kill a bunch of people with a highly virulent pathogen, that's not really doing you any good. You can quarantine, you can figure out ways of a florid, highly virulent illness that just kills people. That can be controlled and contained. What you want is a highly transmissible that infects millions of people, creating a lot of uncertainty. It's like, well, how do we ascertain how many of these people are going to require care? What do we do with the elderly?
So disruption leads to money making.
Disruption causes the enemy, their industry, their agriculture. I mean, look at the way the world responded to, the whole world was shut down.
But in the same time, the goal was not depopulation.
I don't think so, because if your goal with a respiratory pathogen, first of all, in order for it to be highly transmissible, it almost necessarily, virulence has to be, in order to raise transmissibility, you tend to have to lower virulence, because it's rapidly killing people, then it's not easily spreading. You want lots of people out there moving about. Maybe they just have mild symptoms. Those are the people that are spreading it around. The idea of depopulation is more pertinent with the vaccine. Not
the father of Bill Gates was clearly part of the depopulation ideology. And I want to understand someone like Bill Gates, so rich, so filthy rich, what is in it for him to make more money with selling vaccines? I mean, what's the point for him? Op dit exacte moment bewegen er miljoenen onzichtbare frequenties door jouw lichaam en de ruimte om je heen. Radiogolven, wifi, bluetooth, licht en geluid, magnetische velden en misschien zelfs signalen die we nog niet volledig begrijpen. Je ziet ze niet, je hoort ze niet, je voelt ze misschien onbewust, maar wat als ze meer invloed hebben op je leven dan je beseft? Wat is eigenlijk een frequentie? En als alles in het universum trilt, resoneert en een eigen frequentie heeft, welke rol spelen deze onzichtbare krachten dan in ons dagelijks leven? Nou, dat is één van de grote vragen die we gaan onderzoeken tijdens de allereerste editie van de Battle Beyond Science op 18 en 19 september dit jaar. Na het grote succes van de Battle for Science in februari, waar de staat van de wetenschap centraal stond, gaan we nu op zoek naar antwoorden op vragen waar de wetenschap geen of nog geen antwoord op heeft. Welke invloed hebben frequenties op ons lichaam, op onze gezondheid, op onze emoties en bewustzijn? En als die invloed er dan is, hoe werkt dat dan? Nou, dat gaan we dus visualiseren. Op grote schermen tonen we live hoe geluid, water, licht en trillingen zich vertalen naar indrukwekkende patronen en vormen. Niet alleen maar om het te zien, maar vooral ook om te leren, te ervaren en te voelen. Laat je dus verrassen door inspirerende lezingen, live-experimenten met onder andere remote viewing, telepathie, tijdreizen, kwantummechanica en sound healing sessies die wetenschap, verwondering en beleving samenbrengen. Met bijzondere gasten zoals de Britse wetenschapper John Stuart Reid, Erik Larakker, Marijn Poels, Baptiste de Paap, professor Pierre Capel, contactee Elena Danaan en vele andere. Stuk voor stuk sprekers die je zullen uitdagen om verder te kijken dan de grenzen van de traditionele wetenschap. Reserveer vandaag nog je ticket en beleef het allemaal op 18 of 19 september tijdens de allereerste editie van de Battle Beyond Science. Want alles heeft een frequentie.
Waarom zou je moeilijk doen met allerlei apps, wallets en bankrekeningen als dat in één account kan? Beheer al je euro's en crypto's eenvoudig in één app waarbij je altijd toegang hebt tot jouw geld. En de boodschappen betaal je eenvoudig met de betaalpas die je wereldwijd kunt gebruiken. Ga nu naar www.monflow.com/lighthouse en ontvang ook nog eens een gratis betaalpas.
Werk jij als ondernemer nog vanuit een eenmanszaak of VOF? Heb je een goedlopend bedrijf en maak je winst? Maar voel je je als een hamster in een hamsterrad? Je werkt hard, maar je komt geen stap vooruit. Dan kan dat heel goed kloppen. Want waar een eenmanszaak of VOF een fiscale fuik is en jou als ondernemer klein houdt, is een beschermende BV-structuur juist een fiscaal vliegwiel dat je helpt om iets op te bouwen en te groeien. Want met een beschermende BV-structuur betaal je tot wel 50% minder winstbelasting. Je houdt daardoor veel meer over om weer te investeren en al je bezittingen zijn optimaal beschermd. Wil je weten hoe dit zit voor jouw situatie? Vraag dan nu gratis het e-book aan van eenmanszaak naar de beschermende BV-structuur via vrbadvies.nl.
So you raise a number of interesting things. So let's start with depopulation. Someone who is a sort of mastermind of central planning, of resource allocation, someone with a kind of Mao Zedong view of, total control. He might say, we have too many old people who aren't contributing to the economy. They're just sitting around, drawing their pensions.
The useless eaters.
Right. You might say, let's get rid of them. And in the case of coronavirus, 2019, well, you might say that would be a useful way of clearing out the nursing homes.
But a lot of economists say that especially the elderly are a good business case as well, because you have to treat them. They have a lot of money to spend also.
Sure. So, it depends on who your central planner is and what his priorities are. An interesting thing about COVID-19, in the United States, and the model city of this was New York City, the strangest thing happened in March of 2019, and a lot of people, I think, don't really understand this. They find it very puzzling. We were told that we need to do all of these radical contagion control measures. Young people needed to stay at home, wear masks. You couldn't be in groups of more than 3 people. Contagion control. But on March the 25th, 2020, the New York State Health Department issued a directive to all nursing homes saying you can't deny readmission to a nursing home to someone who has COVID-19. You must let them back into the nursing home. So what does that tell you? The one environment in which contagion control was a rational public health decision, our public health authorities did the opposite. No, let COVID-19 into the nursing home. So some of the highest mortality of COVID-19 in the United States was nursing home mortality. What are we supposed to make of this? And the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, he actually was under investigation for high nursing home mortality. The question is, why did your health department pass this directive? It makes no sense. Now, it looked like that investigation was really going to get legs, like the FBI was getting involved. And then suddenly, quite suddenly, we're told that Andrew Cuomo has some women in his office who are making sexual harassment complaints. He resigns from his office under the cloud of sexual harassment, and we never hear about the nursing home scandal ever again. It's just memory hold. It's just wiped from the public consciousness. If you look at this pandemic, there are a million stories like that. They don't make sense. But I wanted to read this. So this is Christian Andersen, Edward Holmes, and Andrew Rambaud. Determining which of more than 1.6 million animal viruses are capable of replicating in humans and transmitting between them would require many decades worth of laboratory work in cell cultures in animals. Even if researchers manage to link each virus genome sequence to substantial experimental data, all sorts of other factors determine whether a virus jumps species and emerges in a human population, such as the distribution and density of animal hosts. Influenza viruses have circulated in horses since the 1950s and in dogs since the early 2000s. For instance, these viruses have not emerged in human populations and perhaps never will for unknown reasons. So the names are notable. That's Edward Holmes, Andrew Rambaud, Christian Andersen.
These are credible people?
These are not only top virologist. Here's the irony of the story, the irony of ironies. When SARS-CoV, so here they are saying the whole pandemic predict enterprise is based on phony propositions. Like, there's no way we could predict any of this. So all of this tinkering around in laboratories with things like bat coronaviruses with the thought, well, maybe someday they'll emerge naturally and become transmissible to humans. Here they are saying the whole proposition is based on false suppositions.
So basically what they're saying is that gain-of-function research doesn't serve humanity.
There's no rational grounds for doing this. That's what they're saying. But here's where the plot thickens considerably. So when SARS-CoV-2 emerges in the Wuhan area, who does Anthony Fauci ask to state their academic opinion about the origin of the virus? Now, before I tell you, what I want to say is the Chinese CDC published the full genome of SARS-CoV-2 in January, the end of January 2020. Anthony Fauci, we now know from Freedom of Information Act requests, he jumps on what's going on here? Anthony Fauci gets on an email thread with Edward Holmes, Christian Andersen, and about 4 other eminent virologists. And the question is, hey boys, what do you make of this genome that was just published? See if you can guess what they said in their private email, which they apparently didn't think was ever going to see the light of day. What do you think they said in their private email correspondence with Anthony Fauci? What was their opinion of the genome that had just been published?
Probably that it's man-made.
Yes. Oh, hey, Anthony, I just don't see how this could have come about through natural evolution.
So you, as a crime author, actually found a smoking gun on the crime scene?
They're saying we don't think this emerged from nature. Okay. 3 weeks later, these guys publish their opinion about the origin for the whole world, for the international press, for the academic press, in Nature. What do you think they say in public?
I can guess the opposite.
We think it emerged from nature. So what I'm saying is that this is all direct documentary evidence of fraud. They all knew it was fraud. They all knew the true origin of it. And the entire vaccine response by Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech, this was a fraudulent response as well. There was no reason to believe that these synthetic messenger RNA vaccines would work. There was no reason to believe they would prevent infection and transmission. This was just an assertion that it will. But there are many reasons that we know where this was never a plausible pandemic response. Let me tell you one more thing, why you're contemplating this. So some researchers in the Netherlands, I believe, well, I'm not sure their university. I'd have to look at their affiliation. But they published in the peer-reviewed academic journal Frontiers in Virology. The year is 2023. In Frontiers of Virology, some biological statisticians and molecular biologists publish a paper in which they say, we took a 19 nucleotide sequence that we found in SARS-CoV-2. It's the part of the genome of the virus that codes for what's called the furin cleavage site. This is a part of the spike protein that made it particularly capable of docking onto human respiratory tract cells and injecting the viral payload. They said we were curious about the genetic sequence of the furin cleavage site. So we found this 19 nucleotide sequence, looking at the genome, and we thought, just for fun, let's do what's called a BLAST database search of viral genome patents. So a lot of people don't realize this. If you're playing around with viruses in a lab and you make them, so you modify the genetic sequence sufficiently where you could say it's no longer occurring in nature, so there's a synthetic man-made element to the genetic sequence, you can patent that. So you patent a viral genome sequence. They said, well, let's do a BLAST database search and let's see if anyone had patented this 19 nucleotide sequence that encompasses the furin cleavage site. Who do you think patented that 19 nucleotide sequence in the year 2016?
Now it gets interesting. 2016.
2016. This is published in Frontiers of Virology by Dutch researchers. Stefan Bancel, the CEO of Moderna. He'd already patented the sequence in 2016. Perfect match. So by standard biological statistics, the probability of that happening by random chance was about 1 in 3 billion.
And this is public information.
Frontiers of Virology. It's a peer-reviewed.
How is it possible that this doesn't lead to breaking news? I mean,
it was published, interestingly enough, the serious press didn't publish it. The Daily Mail picked up the Frontiers in Virology report and said, look, this is a serious academic, peer-reviewed academic journal. These are serious guys in the Netherlands. Like, how do we explain this? So Maria Bartiromo, the Fox News broadcaster, she interviews Bancel. And she's like, she has that kind of funny New York accent. She's like, Stefan, I'm just wondering, like, how do we explain this? It seems kind of strange. And he says, with his funny French accent, I have asked our scientists to look into this. They are looking into it. And she says, well, thank you for having your scientists look into it. But then no follow-up.
Case closed.
No follow-up. So he's looking into it.
You're kidding me.
He's looking into it. Okay, so do you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? Do you remember
the movie?
The movie. Okay.
Yeah.
So the final scene of the film, they've delivered the Ark to the Department of Defense. And Indiana Jones, Professor Jones, is talking to these Department of Defense guys. And he says, do you understand the power of the Ark? And the DOD guy says, well, we're looking into it. And he says, who is looking into it? And the guy has a pipe in his mouth and he says, top people are looking into it. And then the film pans out. So Stefan Bancel's scientists are looking into it. Yeah.
It's amazing, huh?
Yeah.
It must be like a Twilight Zone view because you're a true crime author. This must be delicious ingredients to make a book to create a book, but in the same time, it's reality and it's also horrible. It's also horrible too, because it's real. It's about serious things.
So the problem is, it's all there. The documentation is there. The frontier. I know one of the biostatisticians that help these guys do their analysis. He's a top guy. There's no question that there's a match with Boncel's 2016 patent. That's not in question. So the next question is, why aren't official investigative agencies looking into it? Well, you could ask yourself, why hasn't Congress or the Department of Justice subpoenaed Professor Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina? The paper trail that he was working closely with Shengji Li at the Wuhan Institute of Virology to make bat coronaviruses infectious to humans, he's publishing it in his own papers. He's not concealing it. And in terms of is this gain of function, he states in the biosecurity that it's gain of function. So there's no question about any of this. The question is, why don't our authorities, why aren't they interested in really looking into it? That's the question.
But it's also scareful, because if actually the smoking gun and the truth is already out there, everybody can actually see what's going on if you want to, but it's not happening. That means that the powers in the top are so powerful that they can just do it openly. Without any problem.
So when President Eisenhower left office in 1961, now remember who Eisenhower was. He was the Supreme Allied Commander twice in the Second World War and in the Korean War. So he was no enemy of military affairs. He's the he's the highest ranking military man of the 20th century. He becomes president in the 1950s. He leaves office in 1961 and he gives his farewell address. He told the American people, and by extension all of mankind, he said, I am very, very concerned about the rise of what I call the military-industrial complex. That's what's most remembered from his farewell address. But he says something else that's interesting. I'm also concerned about the rise of the scientific technological elite. So remember that phrase, the scientific technological elite. These are no longer scientists, somebody like Sir Isaac Newton hanging out on his family farm in Cambridgeshire. These are guys who have been handpicked and allocated by governments, by the military, to concentrate scientific research and to bring it under the control of the state and, above all, the military. These guys are getting too much power, and they're not being held accountable for what they're doing. This was Eisenhower's warning in 1961. And it's true, the scientific technological elite, with the protection of the military and the intelligence agencies, they do whatever they want, and there's no accountability. And if anyone from the lay public starts asking questions, and Eisenhower explicitly states this, when concerned citizens ask questions, they're told that they don't have sufficient authority to be raising these questions because they don't have sufficient scientific training. So they're told to just shut up. So this is what we're looking at. But there's a moral dimension to this as well, when a cognitive, perceptual dimension. When I lay this out, it's so monstrous in its dimensions that people can't believe it. They just can't believe it. I mean, they could go and they could look at all of the documentary evidence. It's all here in the book. I mean, it's all cited. There are 291 citations. Everybody can just go read the documentation themselves.
It's almost the same effect as all this child abuse. People look away because it's too awful.
They can't believe it. So a brilliant literary expression of this was a play that was published in Switzerland in 1953. It's called, in German, Biedermann und die Brandstifter. So Biedermann and the Arsonists, written by a Swiss playwright named Max Frisch. Okay. there's a guy named Gottlieb Biedermann, and he's reading he's a very nice middle-class man. He and his wife, they have a nice house somewhere in Switzerland, maybe in Germany, an unnamed village. And he's reading in the newspaper about Brandstifter that are running around the countryside, and they're setting fire to people's homes. But they have a very strange modus operandi. They knock on the door, and they introduce themselves as traveling salesmen, and there's no room in the hotel, so could we stay in your house for the night? And Gottlieb Biedermann reads this. He says, well, what kind of naive fool would let these guys in to his home? You'd have to be some special kind of stupid. Doorbell rings. Couple of young men, good-looking, attractive, charming, sort of helpful. They're kind of gallant or courteous to Frau Biedermann. And they say, well, we're salesmen, and we've been caught out at, and we don't have a room in the hotel, and could we stay with you? So their appearance of normalcy, they look normal. They're actually quite charming. They're engaging. They're sort of nice boys. Oh, well, okay, sure. I mean, you can stay. So what do? They burn the house down, which then catches fire to the whole village, and the whole village burns down. And then Herr Biedermann and Frau Biedermann are then transported to the gates of hell, where they meet the two traveling salesmen. And they say, well, I'm Satan. This is my sidekick, Beelzebub. But the question for you is, why did you let us in? Like, why did you? And I think what Fritsch was trying to tell us was that it's precisely when things are out in the open, they're right in front of you. It seems like normal people that are doing this. We can't see it because it's hiding in plain sight.
Je werkt hard en spaart, maar toch klopt er iets niet. Geld op de bank lijkt veilig, maar wordt steeds minder waard. Soms zit de oplossing in iets eenvoudigs. Iets wat al duizenden jaren waarde houdt. Goud en zilver. Bij Goud 999 koop je eenvoudig fysiek edelmetaal. Veilig en op jouw naam opgeslagen in Zwitserland. Meer dan 25.000 spaarders gingen je al voor. Wil je niet alleen sparen, maar ook jouw vermogen beschermen? Ga naar goud999safe.com/lighthouse en ontvang tijdelijk 5 gram zilver cadeau.
Waar komt ons eten vandaan en door wie wordt het gemaakt? Die vraag houdt mij al jaren bezig. Daarom ben ik gaan werken aan mijn eigen natuurlijke productlijn. Met ingrediënten van zorgvuldig geselecteerde boeren en afkomstig van dieren die een goed leven hebben gehad. Bij Real Roots beginnen we niet bij het product, maar bij de bron. We selecteren voedingsrijke ingrediënten uit de puurste leefomgevingen. Van vitamine A tot zink brengen we de kracht van dierlijke voeding samen. Orgaanvlees, bottenbouillon, colostrum, oesters en grasgevoerd rundvlees. In geconcentreerde vorm, zodat deze traditionele voedingsmiddelen op een eenvoudige en logische manier passen binnen een moderne dagelijkse routine. Ik ben Gino, oprichter van Real Roots. En ik geloof in de kracht van de natuur. Ontdek wat echte voedingsstoffen voor jou kunnen betekenen op realroots.nl met code LIGHTHOUSE.
Wij staan voor een digitale wereld waarin privacy, veiligheid en vrijheid van meningsuiting de norm zijn. Vind jij dat ook belangrijk? Kom dan nu in actie en ontvang gratis de Pro Privacy Checklist met bijna 100 praktische tips waarmee je vandaag nog je privacy kunt terugpakken. Ga naar proprivacy.io/checklist.
So when Bill Gates goes on CNN and he's wearing his kind of V-neck sweater and he has this kind of nerdy way of no one can believe that he is basically someone who has been orchestrating all of this behind the scenes for 15 years. It's now come out in these Jeffrey Epstein files that he was actually keenly working on this with his friend Jeffrey Epstein. to how do we financialize, how do we capitalize from the next pandemic? So it's monopolistic, organized financial activity to create vast, enormous profits and power that one could never achieve by just an ordinary marketplace business.
But it's still not an answer to my deepest question. Why does Bill Gates need more money?
Why did Napoleon Bonaparte want to conquer all of Europe? Why in 1812 did some of his best people say, look, we're having a great run in Western Europe. Don't try and take it to Moscow. Why did he want to do that? Why?
It's never enough. Is that the answer?
Some men want to rule the world. And I think, so Flavio, can I do one more little brief digression, or are we running out of time?
We're running out of time, but it's important.
Okay. So what do you see here? You mentioned that your mother grew up in the Catholic tradition.
I see this coin with the Vatican.
Yeah. So this was issued by the Vatican in 2022. It's a commemorative 20 euro silver coin commemorating the COVID-19 vaccine. If you read the Numista catalog issued by Vatican City, the description is, this coin commemorates the successful development of the COVID-19 vaccine. Depicted is a boy who prepares to receive the vaccine. Now, I'll ask you, that phrase, a boy, in a Catholic context, a boy prepares to receive. What does that sound like to you?
A sacrifice?
A boy prepares to receive the Eucharist. It's the Holy Communion. Yeah? So this is a holy act of taking something unto the body that will protect you. This is just overlaying Catholic iconography, Catholic ritual, a sacred Catholic rite with taking the vaccine. And the Holy Father, Franciscus, he said everybody should get this. It's like everybody should take Christ unto their heart. All of mankind should take this vaccine. Now, you look at Bill Gates in April 2020. He says, the world is a place of great turmoil and fear, and it's, disruption. The world will go back to normal when everyone on Earth gets the vaccine. So the vaccine is a liberator and a savior of mankind. So no guns, no gulags, no Gestapo or SS stormtroopers. Everyone joyfully lines up to get it. It's the ultimate ritualistic act of obedience. And it's all men and women and children on Earth. It's the greatest instrument of global obedience ever conceived by the mind of man. Napoleon goes off leading an army of 650,000 soldiers to Moscow. Well, that's extremely dangerous.
Do you think it's more than just a financial interest? Is there also something
control of all
religious
of
or deeper dark in this ritual?
The religiosity is the recognition that humans, if they believe, if they have faith, they don't resist. They only resist when they don't believe. So I didn't believe in this. I didn't find this religious iconography and messaging compelling. I look at this as a sacrilege. I look at Pope Francis as a pretender. I look at this and see fraud. But apparently a lot of people thought of this new vaccine as a savior.
Last question for you. Do you believe that your book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, is just a document for people that find confirmation in what they already knew? Or is it also going to lead to truth, to a wider consciousness in the civilization and maybe tribunals, whatever, that the people, the perpetrators, get behind bars?
I think that going back to President Eisenhower's farewell address, the military-industrial complex and the scientific technological elite, I think what he saw in the 1950s already terrified him back then. I think this complex, this military and scientific technological elite, now they've gotten into the biopharmaceutical industry. I think they've done such a good job of capturing all institutions on Earth, including financial partnerships, that somebody like me, or even my distinguished eminent author, co-author Peter McCullough, I think it would be very, very difficult for us to counter the vast global power of these entities. And even President Trump, I mean, I don't think it's too late for President Trump. I mean, he still has 3 years in office. I think as chief executive, but he would have to come out on his own independently of consulting with the Department of Defense and the CIA. He would have to come out as an individual president and speak directly to we the people. I don't know if he's prepared to do that. I mean, after all, look at what happened to John Kennedy.
I said last question. This is going to be the last question because people watching this interview might get depressed by the message and also by the fact that the powers that be are so powerful that we can't touch them. Is there any hope?
Well, we have more and more people like you. We do have more and more independent broadcasters who are speaking to millions of people. There's Tucker Carlson in the United States. There's Joe Rogan. I mean, there's Brett Weinstein. There are different voices like yours. The question is, are we strong enough to tilt the balance where people become fully aware, fully awake? People can either find themselves gravitating to the power of this world, the money, the status, the career advancement, the position that this affords, or they can say, well, I understand the temptation of it, but I'm not going to yield to the temptation. The question is, where do we get to the tipping point where it's those who don't yield to this temptation, who are actually interested in pursuing truth? I don't know. Keep doing the good work, though, and maybe we'll find out.
Finally, a spark of hope, because we are the many, and the people watching all together, yes, we are the many. And I want to ask you all to share this video with as many people as you can, because it's important to spread the word. That's, I think, the most powerful thing that we can do, and that's within our power. So do that, support us, share it. And John Leake, thank you for this interesting interview, and have a safe trip back home.
Thank you, Flavia.
Op dit exacte moment bewegen er miljoenen onzichtbare frequenties door jouw lichaam en de ruimte om je heen. Radiogolven, wifi, bluetooth, licht en geluid, magnetische velden en misschien zelfs signalen die we nog niet volledig begrijpen. Je ziet ze niet, je hoort ze niet, je voelt ze misschien onbewust, maar wat als ze meer invloed hebben op je leven dan je beseft? Wat is eigenlijk een frequentie? En als alles in het universum trilt, resoneert en een eigen frequentie heeft, welke rol spelen deze onzichtbare krachten dan in ons dagelijks leven? Nou, dat is één van de grote vragen die we gaan onderzoeken tijdens de allereerste editie van de Battle Beyond Science op 18 en 19 september dit jaar. Na het grote succes van de Battle for Science in februari, waar de staat van de wetenschap centraal stond, gaan we nu op zoek naar antwoorden op vragen waar de wetenschap geen of nog geen antwoord op heeft. Welke invloed hebben frequenties op ons lichaam, op onze gezondheid, op onze emoties en bewustzijn? En als die invloed er dan is, hoe werkt dat dan? Nou, dat gaan we dus visualiseren. Op grote schermen tonen we live hoe geluid, water, licht en trillingen zich vertalen naar indrukwekkende patronen en vormen. Niet alleen maar om het te zien, maar vooral ook om te leren, te ervaren en te voelen. Laat je dus verrassen door inspirerende lezingen, live-experimenten met onder andere remote viewing, telepathie, tijdreizen, kwantummechanica en sound healing sessies die wetenschap, verwondering en beleving samenbrengen. Met bijzondere gasten zoals de Britse wetenschapper John Stuart Reid, Erik Larakker, Marijn Poels, Baptiste de Paap, professor Pierre Capel, contactee Elena Danaan en vele andere. Stuk voor stuk sprekers die je zullen uitdagen om verder te kijken dan de grenzen van de traditionele wetenschap. Reserveer vandaag nog je ticket en beleef het allemaal op 18 of 19 september tijdens de allereerste editie van de Battle Beyond Science. Want alles heeft een frequentie.